Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. This is Gary Wilson, your host. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad you're back too. Could ask you a favor. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the podcast. It's on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, actually 30 different channels. And for those of you in other countries, thank you so much for doing this. I know we're in 50 plus countries right now. Pretty amazing. And we do have a lot of foreign investors in the United States. It's easy to do. I wrote a white paper years ago on how to invest in the United States. I'll give it to you for free if you want. Just go to my website, leave a message. I'll get that for you. By the way, speaking of websites, go to the website, realestatewithgarywilson.com. Go ahead and click on members area. If you're a member, you know what to do. If you're not a member, go to the right-hand side, go in for free for 30 days and grab everything you can get. Treat it like it's Christmas morning and unwrap all those gifts. There's books you can get for free. There's over 300 recorded webinars on every subject related to real estate, all of that. And more importantly than anything else, there's a community site where you can find your local investor agent. It's a special term we use because we've trained them. I know who they are personally because I'm the one that trained them, and they're certified. This is the only place they can get the certification. Okay, they have the tools and the methods and the strategies to go find properties off market as well as on market. They know how to identify them, analyze them, and negotiate them for you and me. It doesn't cost you a dime. And so definitely use that resource, one of the most critical members of your investing team. So in any case, speaking of team members, I want to introduce Mike Sjogren here in a second. Mike and I have known each other for several years, and I'm going to go ahead and put this out there in front. I fully endorse him. I know him personally. I've read one of his books. He and I are a lot alike. He's data oriented. You have to have education and information to make the right education, right information to make right actions, take right actions, and get right results. So we follow the same credo there. So I'm glad to introduce this. So Mike, welcome aboard, buddy. Good to see you again. And I thank you so much for taking your time to do this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a long time. Glad we get to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, I know a little bit about you, but probably a lot of other people don't. Would you mind just giving us some intel on Mike Sjogren? Give us some good secrets too, stuff that maybe other people really wouldn't know.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mike Sjogren. I'm based just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I've got a beautiful wife, Krysten, and a 5-year-old boy, Caden. They're my whole world. They're my driving force. This is why I do what I do. And real quickly on how I kind of went from employee to full-time investor, I was working as a CPA. I did what they told me to do. I went to school, got good grades, get a quote unquote good job, and kind of worked my way up through the ranks. And, I was working in corporate, salary was good, everything was comfortable. And then when my son was born, he was born with a very rare lung disease called interstitial lung disease. So basically, anytime he fell asleep, he had to be on oxygen and he had to be monitored and all this craziness. And at one point, we were at Boston Children's Hospital, and we'd been there about 3 weeks straight. All the doctors were coming in, giving us their daily prognosis and all this stuff. And I couldn't even hear what they were saying. The only thing I could think about was, I've been here 3 weeks straight. I'm all out of vacation time. I'm all out of sick time. I have a mountain of hospital bills piling up, and I'm going to have to leave my wife and my baby boy in the hospital to go back to a cubicle to trade time for money. And I was so angry with myself for putting my family in that situation. I told my wife that day, I said, I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way to build us a business that gives us the income we want without trading time for money ever again. And I knew that real estate was going to be the vehicle. I just knew. At that time, I had met Gary and a bunch of other successful investors, and I was like, this is possible. And so I started, analyzing multifamily and all these different things. And then I met a gentleman who was doing short-term rentals, and I didn't really know what it was. I had never stayed in an Airbnb or anything like that, but he was telling me how he was making anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month on these properties, and he didn't even own them. And, part of me called BS. I was like, there's no way that this is even possible. Mm-hmm. But like the good accountant, I was like, show me your books. I want to see your books then. Right. And so we opened them up and I was checking it out and I was like, wow, this is real. Like he's actually bringing in this cash flow. So I told my wife about it, and I said, I don't know about this strategy he's doing, but the short-term rental thing makes sense. We didn't have a lot of cash, but I did have a 401k. So I pulled a loan out of my 401k, and we went and put a down payment on a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo up in the mountains in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. We said, all right, we're going to give this a shot, but we're going to promise ourselves that we're going to use it every single month as a family, no matter what. And then we'll rent it out when we're not using it and see how it does. And just like this guy said, since that day, that was back in beginning of 2018, that property's cash flow about $1,500 a month net after everything. And I was like, this is the coolest business model ever. Like, I get paid to own a vacation house that I can use whenever I want, but I didn't have any more money to invest, and I couldn't live off of $1,500 a month. So I started brainstorming different ideas on how I could scale this, and we can get into the details in a bit, but within a year and a half, we had 15 properties in 5 states. I was out of my job. My wife was out of her job. I retired my mom. Then we were off to the races. Now we've got 2 boutique hotels, just put an offer in on a 3rd one. We've got 40 something properties now that we've been doing the last few years. And it's just kept rolling, and it's been a hell of a ride. And that's kind of the quick and dirty of it.
Yeah. Well, I love the subject. Airbnb has been around now for probably 12 or more years. But most people haven't heard of it until probably, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And what's interesting is in this last year, several months ago, they actually went public. Now you can purchase Airbnb stock. So now they're in the big leagues. But what's really cool about this is they took something that was a need/want, and they brought together, supply and demand. In other words, there was plenty of homes out there with empty bedrooms, right? People's children had grown up and moved on. People get divorced, and now they've got the 4-bedroom house, and then they're by themselves, things like that. So they took the B&B model, bed and breakfast, big homes, small mansions, country estates, whatever you want to call them, took that model and applied it to the everyday home. And it was genius, and it worked. And people were already doing that historically, but it wasn't commercialized. Nobody took it and built an infrastructure around it. And that's what Airbnb did. And the thing I like about it is traditional rentals, obviously they're still necessary and you can still buy them and profit from them, but it is more difficult, particularly in the higher priced areas, the cash flow on traditional rentals. In other words, the income doesn't justify the cost basis as much as it did years ago. So Airbnb is a very solid, viable, stable alternative to traditional rentals. And I've seen Airbnb in almost every community in the country. I've traveled, taught in literally 600 plus cities and towns, and I found Airbnb in every single one of them, But without going into a lot of details of my experience as a user, Mike, if you could, give us some of the fundamentals, like what actually is Airbnb at its core, and then we can talk about where, like geographically and timing and things like that later, but kind of give people a little more detail or intel on what really is Airbnb. How does that actually work?
Yeah. So Airbnb is essentially a marketing platform, right? Like you mentioned, it's connecting people, travelers, and homeowners, right? And so what they've done an amazing job at it, and I call it like the training wheels for short-term rentals. Their platform is extremely easy to use, and they take a lot of the traditional stuff that you'd have to do. Like, they vet the guests, they verify their identities, they get their licenses, they collect all the payments, they pay the taxes for you in most of the areas. Like, they do a lot, and they make it very, very simple to use. And that's why they've done so well, right? And so all that we're doing, I use the analogy, like if you went to a ball game, right, and you bought a bottle of water at a ball game, it might be $5 for water. But if you go to Costco, you can get a case of water for $5, right? All that we're doing is we're going to Costco, getting that case of water, and we're selling it by the night. So instead of selling or renting the real estate by the year, like a 12-month lease, we're selling it by the night, and it's furnished. So people will pay a premium for that. So that's why we've seen you should go anywhere from 2 to 5xing your revenue going from a long-term rental to a short-term rental. Okay? Mm-hmm. But the advice that I give a lot of investors, especially if you're doing this in more of an urban or suburban market, not necessarily a vacation area, is it absolutely works. But I would always encourage you to run the numbers both ways. Make sure it would still cash flow as a long-term rental, and then just look at the short-term rental revenue as the icing on the cake. Because if for whatever reason you decide it's not fit, or you just some regulation changes or something happens, I don't want to see anybody get caught holding the bag and then you're bleeding money every month. So just make sure
Right.
cash flows both ways.
Yeah. Well, I know in a lot of destination areas, people, instead of what they used to do was buy a vacation home and keep it for themselves. And if they weren't there, it'd sit empty, which is crazy. And then people, of course, started buying fractional ownership in those things too. But this is a great alternative. So now, like an area like, the Gulf Coast of Florida, right? St. Pete, Clearwater, all that. And you can buy a condo or a duplex or whatever, and rent it out through Airbnb. In most cases, I know there's some areas that have restrictions. While you're not there, right, which is probably better than using a traditional rental company. That resort areas typically charge 20%. You use Airbnb, you get your money. It's better money, and yet you can carve out the weeks you want for yourself. I think there's rules there, but you can carve out the weeks you want for yourself. So there is flexibility built into this Airbnb model compared to the old way, which is use a traditional management company to rent your second home out while you're not there. Now, as far as geography goes, location. So I've been to Airbnbs that are strictly attracting business travelers like me. I've seen other areas that are strictly attracting destination travelers. People want to go on vacation. And I've also seen other areas that actually were both. I mean, there are areas I'm like, holy smokes, this is ingenious, because you got the business traveler and you got the vacation traveler. And sometimes they're doing both. They're combining business and pleasure and writing the whole thing off. But what have you seen, or any suggestions there as far as location, and what areas do, maybe not specific towns or cities, unless you know that, but as far as like what the area offers, like St. Louis versus Orlando, for example, I mean, what kind of suggestions or what are your observations there,
Yeah, so we don't need to go into all of them, and we'll throw out a link at the end that I have a deeper dive training on this, but there's really 9 different reasons why people travel. Most people think of the top 2 that you just said, either vacationing or business. But then there's also medical. If you're near a decent sized hospital, it doesn't have to be huge, but you're going to get traveling nurses, you're going to get outpatient services, you're going to get family visiting patients, all that kind of stuff. If you're near a university, same thing, you're going to get traveling educators, you're going to get parents visiting kids, all these different things. And there's 9 different reasons why people travel. So when I'm analyzing a market, I'm trying to gauge how many of these different traveler profiles can I hit within a certain radius. And the more of them that I can hit, the better it is, quite frankly, right? The more different types of demographics that I can go to. If I think of a place, so like we have a property down, it's actually my brother's, and we run it for him over on 30A. So it's over on the Panhandle between Destin and Panama City Beach. That property does extremely well, right? And a lot of people said, well, how did it do during COVID? And I said, well, great question. So what we did is we had to pivot our marketing. So instead of writing in the listing descriptions all the amazing stuff about everything local and all the stuff you can do, we pivoted and marketed towards essential travelers and essential workers, because Panama City Beach has a few decent sized hospitals. So we were getting in doctors that got relocated to Panama City Beach that were like, we're just going to stay in Mike's sick beach house and just stay here instead of staying at some hotel, right? So it's just, you're trying to adjust who you're going to market to during different periods of time. My model from the beginning. So I do have a few like true vacation spots. We've got a true like waterfront, like beach hotel, like those are true destination, like vacation spots. But the majority of the portfolio, what we do is I don't go inside of a major city. Like I won't operate in Boston or in New York City or Miami or any big city like that, because regulations there's a lack of housing to begin with.
Yeah.
So they look at us as taking inventory off the street. But I'll go 30 to 40 minutes outside the city, so it's easily accessible, and I'll look for a lot of those other things. Is there some type of business center nearby? Is there a convention center? Is there a beach? Is there a college? Is there a hospital? All these other things. And then I also have easy access into the city, so if people do want to go into the city, they can. And that was just my model. We did it in North Carolina, we've done it in Massachusetts, we've done it in New Hampshire, like all these different areas. That's what's worked really well for us. And that's what I advise a lot of people, because again, you're going to pay premium money to invest in a big city, or to be right in Gatlinburg or right in Lake Tahoe or any of these big vacation spots. But if you go just outside, your money's going to go further and your nightly rates are not going to compress that much.
Right. Yeah. I've actually seen that in ski resorts, by the way. What you just described there, it just never occurred to me until you've explained it. So thank you for explaining that. So you mentioned a few places, North Carolina, for example, and I know there's a great website called How Money Moves. It's amazing. It's free. It's based on IRS tax filings. How Money Moves, and you can click on any state and you can see where the money's leaving, going, and where the money's going to, but also where the money's coming from. So in North Carolina, for example, I looked this up because I'm a resident of Florida. In the last year, Florida inherited nearly $40 billion from New York. It's not tracking people migration, it's money migration. And that's just one example from one state to another. And you can see people are leaving New York and California in droves, where the money's being, and it's going to some of the obvious ones, Texas, Florida, things like that, and Georgia. But what I didn't realize is, like Tennessee, North Carolina, like you mentioned, like, holy smokes, this is an amazing source of information. So does that come into play? Like, is there any place in North Carolina you can, name, if you're allowed to name it, a city or a town that works for maybe a couple of them, or have you heard about people doing this in Tennessee? I know Florida is going to be pretty obvious. You got Orlando and all the beaches and all that, but anything specific geographically come to mind, Mike, that you don't mind sharing, you're allowed to share?
Yeah, sure. So again, going back to the strategy, like in North Carolina, we have some properties near Asheville. They're not in Asheville, but they're on the outskirts of Asheville. And I have some students on the outskirts of Asheville. Mm-hmm. And as an example, one of my students, he's got a bunch of them now, but his first one he bought, it was in a town called Brevard, which is south of Asheville. And I think he bought it for like $280, and he's netting net $5,000 a month on that property. Like, it's crazy how well he's doing on that property, right? And there's some other factors in there, like it's in a type of community that has a lot of cool amenities and all these different things. But like, for that purchase price and that amount of cash flow, it's insanity. I think he's at like a 90% cash on cash return. All right, that's incredible. I don't want to set the expectation that that's going to happen everywhere. But again, like if I normally invest for say a 15% cash on cash return, with the short-term rentals, I would go for at least 25 to 40%, because the increase in the cash flow is just that much greater. So a lot of people are investing in the Smoky Mountains right now. Great market for rentals. That being said, price points keep going up. So you can still make money, but eventually that cash on cash is going to keep shrinking. Now, what I always try and say to people is, you do not have to be in these major markets for this to work. Like, I'm in a bunch of towns that most people have probably never heard of that do very well. Okay. Like, one of our markets is Salem, Massachusetts. Some people might know it because around Halloween, it's like the hot spot because of all the witch trials back in the day. But other than that, nobody really talks about it. One of the properties that we're running, it would rent for $2,000 a month, is a long-term rental. In July of this year, that property did over 10,000.
Wow.
Like just in July, right? So like over the course of a year in 2020, we did 64,000 in revenue on that property.
Yeah.
So like it's almost triple what it was doing before, right?
Yeah.
And even with some additional expenses, they're still netting. It was over $1,000 a month after my fees and everything else that the owner was going to net on that deal. So like, it works basically anywhere. I've got students, I joke, in the middle of nowhere, Canada, right? Like there was a town, I think it was called Osler. There was like 1,200 people in it. And this person converted a bunch of their rentals and they increased their revenue by 75%. Like 1,200 people in this town. So like, it will work. One thing that a lot of people don't understand too is like, people move away, right? Like life events, like people move away. Like my brother now lives in Athens, Georgia. Few times a year, either I'm going to go visit him or he's going to come visit me. And as our families have gotten bigger and bigger, they're going to end up staying in some type of short-term rental because it just makes more sense.
Yeah.
So people move away and they come back for just a visit. They come for birthdays, wakes, funerals, weddings, whatever it is. So life events happen everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? And then you factor in some of those other traveler profiles that I talked about, and that's a decent chunk of your business right there. So you don't have to be in those major markets.
Yeah. It's interesting. You've mentioned two places. So Brevard, ironically, I know exactly where it is because I used to go to boys camp, YMCA camp up there near Brevard in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And we used to go into Brevard to get ice cream whenever we behaved ourselves. That's what we did. And in Asheville, one of the, if for those of you listening, if you've never been to Asheville, North Carolina, you need to go. You got the Biltmore Estate there. And I made my offer. I tried to buy it. Of course, I got outbid, right? No, just kidding. Beautiful place, great surrounding area, Smoky Mountains, just absolutely spectacular. In Athens, Georgia, where's the group REM is from, and it's also a college town. So great, being in a college town is probably a good thing to do, for a good place to be for Airbnb. Now, as far as timing, it's been my experience, Mike. I've been investing for 35 years. Everybody says, well, I'm going to wait till the next recession and I'll scoop up a lot of goodies then. But the reality is you have what's called missed opportunity costs, lost opportunity costs. There's always a strategy for any market, whether it's going up or down. Investors never stop investing once you learn all the different strategies. And I'm telling you, Airbnb always works. Even last year in the recession, some of them took a black eye here and there, but they're still there and they're still here. So the reality is never leave your money sitting around idle. Always deploy it. Real estate's a very, very forgiving commodity to invest in. You can make a mistake and still make money in real estate. The property's still there. It never goes to zero. It's an amazing thing. But is there a timing component, like as far as seasonal or maybe even economic? And we're looking at this economy now. We got this interesting dynamic in housing of supply and demand, almost unprecedented. And then you throw in inflation, and of course the television, I'm not knocking television, but they're only reporting what they're given to report. And I'm telling you, the fundamentals, they never lie. Fundamentals like natural laws, you just can't overcome them. It's there in writing, but nobody knows when. If we did, we'd all be gajillionaires. But what are your thoughts on that? Does it affect your decision making? Or is it, hey, I'm always in the business of looking for a good Airbnb property, regardless of what the economy's doing,
I think the question to ask yourself is, am I a long-term buy and hold investor? Or am I trying to flip something and get in and out in a year, 2 years, 3 years? For me, I'm a long-term investor. So whether the market's doing this, as long as it's paying me every single month, I look at it like I'm owning an ATM machine. So I have no reason to sell that property. So I don't necessarily want to overpay, but at the same time, if it makes money at the rate that it's at now, and I'm planning to hold it long-term, real estate, it goes up and down. But if you look at it over a 30-year period, it's always going up, right? But for me, I'm always trying to look, all right, 30 years out, am I still going to be good? Is it still going to be cash flowing for me? Is this a good investment? Right? And your point about are you able to find deals? I bought a hotel in the middle of COVID, probably the worst time in history to buy a hotel. Right? Literally, we bought a hotel with a couple partners. It was 2.25 million, put about 600 into it to reposition it. So we're all in it for 2.85. I just get the appraisal back a couple days ago. It's worth 5.5 million now in a year and a half, right? So the deals are there, but you have to be patient and you have to know what you're looking for. So getting clarity around what are your parameters, who are you targeting, what types of properties do you want, and then working with Gary's investor agents, it's going to make their job way easier, but not easier. It's more it's filtering out all the noise. So when the deal that you're looking for comes up, they're going to think of you first because this is exactly what you're looking for. So it's identifying, what am I really looking for? What is my strategy? And then building that team around you of resources like investor agents to go out and find the deals for you. And then it's a win-win all the way around. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I appreciate the logic there, and it makes so much sense. Are there tools you use or methods or strategies for people listening? They're probably thinking, well, how do I find the right kind of property for Airbnb? Do I look on the MLS? What do these investor agents do? I know you probably do know some of my investor agents, by the way. So, but I know we have certain tools we use that go off. They're basically off market. But anything you can think of, Mike, that you're able to share as far as tools or methods or strategies, and how do you find the right property that makes sense for Airbnb?
Yeah, for sure. And so there's a site out there that it's called AirDNA. All right. And I can send you a link, and I think it gives you a free trial or something like that, but I'll give you the link there and you can put it in the show notes. But there's a site called AirDNA. And what AirDNA does is it pulls all the data from Airbnb and VRBO and maybe booking.com now too. I'm not sure, but it pulls all that data, and you can view like historical data, and it'll give you estimates of like, okay, this is your property. You can plug in any address, put in a number of beds, baths, people it sleeps, and it'll pull a bunch of comps and give you an estimate of what it would do. That's great, but I always like to go a level deeper. You know, we're data people, like you said. So I'll go through and scrape the last 2 years of data to see what did the average property, what did the average 2-bedroom do in this market? What did the top 25% do? And what did the top 10% do? Because I know for me, the way that we operate this, I tend to outperform AirDNA by 30%, just based on the tools we use, all of our dynamic pricing, all the business tools, our automation, everything else. Like most people doing short-term rentals right now are not running it like a business. Those are the facts. Like they find a property, they're like, oh, Airbnb's easy. They throw it up there. They're cleaning it themselves. They're using cell phone photos. They're not treating it like a business. So when we come into the market and we implement all of our systems, it's not even fair, to be honest, because it's right. Just, outperform everybody by light years using all these different tools. What you're going to see happen over the next probably 3 years, that's going to be the new benchmark. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of like the old school type that are just throwing a property on there, seeing what it'll do, not really furnishing it well, pricing it manually or just setting a rate and forgetting it. Like they're going to get pushed out because they're not going to be able to compete. Right. And the bar will just continue to get raised. So that's why it's important. You just got to stay current on everything that's going on and all the new tools and the technologies and everything else that can really take the business to the next level. So that would be my advice, is to just really get clear on that, and then focus on finding properties that will attract those different traveler profiles, investing in really good interior design, spend the money on good photography, and then invest in the tools that are really going to optimize and maximize your profits in the business. Yeah,
I like it. What's interesting is, like you said earlier in the broadcast here, Airbnb is really a marketing vehicle. You still have to have systems in place. You've got to, but does Airbnb help you identify like a local cleaning crew and things like that, or people on the road to get their own maintenance repair guy, that type of thing? Or
no, they don't have anything like that. But again, if they click that link, we'll include the free. It's about 30 minutes. It's like a nice and tight masterclass that I put together that'll walk through how to find all those people and all the different systems that you're going to need.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I know we're kind of getting close to that magical half-hour mark, and I know if you're listening, you're thinking, gee, I got to get back to work and things like that. So I appreciate that. Hey, Mike, how can people, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Website, chapter in the book, like you said, that half-hour instructional set there. What's the best thing they can do? Because it's such a hot topic right now. And I know a lot of the people listening are thinking, I'm going to look at this, because they're looking at hearing the numbers. And guys, I'm telling you, I know Mike personally. I've been a consumer of Airbnb. I have students who do Airbnb, and it is the real deal. It's legitimate. You can definitely do this, and it's a lot more income than just versus traditional rentals, So Mike, go ahead and kind of take us home here. How can we get a hold of you and work with you,
Yeah, for sure. So you can go to STR, like short-term rental, strsecrets.com. We've got a bunch of free resources on there. I've got that free masterclass on there. I have the Short-Term Rental Secrets podcast, where every week we're releasing new content, bringing on other experienced hosts, different vendors. Definitely check those two out. I'm big on Clubhouse right now. It's at Michael Sjogren. I go for hours on end on Clubhouse. Okay. I've got a free Facebook group, the Short-Term Rental Secrets Facebook group. It's basically our community for all the podcast listeners. I wanted to bring everybody together and give them a chance. So when you listen to the podcast, that podcast is released 2, 3, 4 weeks after we record it. But the members of the group, we stream it live to that group. And at the end, when I cut it, you can ask the guests your questions. So it's a way for you to engage, ask me, ask the guests, ask E, my co-host, whatever questions you have. And we also have exclusive content on there that I have, like Mindset Monday videos that I release every Monday. Tuesdays with Mike and Mike, where we talk all things short-term rentals, a bunch of stuff that we put a lot of time into that group to just try and add as much value to you guys as possible.
Yeah. Well, that's that is such a great format that you're running there. And it makes it so easy for people to engage with you and learn and participate. And the fact that you have the masterclass for free too, so that's pretty phenomenal. So what I'll do, Mike, is I'm going to have you on I teach a Monday night live class to the investor agents, and investors are on there too, by the way. I'll have you do that also, and we can actually do some instruction, because that's going to be audio and video, and we can share screens and things like that. But for now, boy, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking your time to do this. I know you, and I know you're busy and successful, and I'm just so grateful to connect with you again, have you on my podcast after all these years. So thanks again. And for everybody listening, take Mike up on what he's offering there, guys. It's short-term rental secrets, STR secrets. Is that right?
Yep, strsecrets.com.
Go there, play around with it. It's like you're in the sandbox. Go there and have fun and learn and participate. And I promise you, you'll be grateful, because you can never have too much education. You can never have too much information. And for everybody also listening, make sure you go to the realestatewithgarywilson.com website. Click on members area. On the right-hand side, you'll get in for free for 30 days. Go to the community site. You'll see the link for community site, and get yourself an investor agent. And while you're there, if you want to grab some other free information, get the free books and all that too. But for right now, just remember strsecrets.com. Mike Sjogren is the guy. It's SJOGREN. Okay, he's up in Beantown, Austin. Great place to be, especially if you want lobster. So, but again, so everybody, you guys take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families, and we will see you on the next podcast. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.